Kia ora koutou. Welcome, everyone. Tū mai I runga, tū mai I raro, tū mai I roto, tū mai I waro, geto ai te mori su, te mori ora, ki te katoa, humie, tākia. Great. Now, for a bit of health and safety, for exits in case of emergency is where you came in, and if you want to assemble on the grassy area. Bathrooms are out in the corridor next to the lifts, and for those at home, I'm sure you can sort yourselves out. So at SBN, we are absolutely committed to bringing a sustainable future quicker. We want to speed up this transition to a sustainable future. And one of the key ways that we do that is to uncover, support and profile innovations that are circular, regenerative, low emissions and equitable. And we do this via our awards program. And so last year, we identified disruptive innovations and transformative leaders. Those are the next 95. And the next wave is around taking the pulse. How are those businesses doing? How are they performing now? What's their optimism like? Are they making any money? And importantly, what do they need to scale? What are those barriers that we need to help them break down to scale and bring about this future that we all want? Now, this has been a collaboration with the University of Canterbury. We're delighted that we have one of the co-authors, Dr. Kate Prendergast, who's going to talk us through the key findings shortly. Then we're going to hear directly from some of these innovators. We're going to hear from Jessie Stanley, who's a director and co-founder of Grub. We're going to hear from Andrew Minturn, the co-founder and joint MD at CLEVACO. And then Rohan MacMahon, who's a partner at Venture Capital Climate Fund. So we're going to just hear, direct from these innovators. Then we're going to warm everyone up with a fireside chat with these people, and my colleague Vincent is going to take us through that. Then I will tell you what's next. So that's the plan. Thank you for coming, and it's a pleasure to hand over to Kate.
Kia ora koutou. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I know I speak on behalf of my colleague and co-author, Associate Professor Joya Kemper, that we're really thrilled to be partnering with the Sustainable Business Network on the Next Wave Barometer. But we're also excited to partner with them more broadly, and so we've been really grateful for the industry insights that the Sustainable Business Network has provided into our sustainability programs at the University of Canterbury. And so I'm really excited to share today that the University of Canterbury is also planning a new Masters of Sustainable Futures and Innovation. So subject to regulatory approval, that will be online next year, hopefully. So watch this space, or see me if you want any more information. So as we support this next generation of change makers, it's also really inspiring to see what's happening in the industry, what's happening to drive sustainable futures. But what we don't know is what this industry looks like. Oh, wrong way. So what does our sustainable ecosystem look like in Aotearoa New Zealand? Where are the opportunities? Where are the challenges? And what are the actions and support mechanisms that we can put in place to drive sustainable futures so that people, place and planet can flourish? These are some of the questions that we wanted to know with the Next Wave barometer. This barometer is a survey of 44 businesses who were finalists in the Sustainable Business Awards in 2024. So these are disruptive innovators. These are our pioneers in clean tech, circular economy solutions, social equity, and climate solutions. These are the businesses with aspirations to drive sustainable change for better futures. So what does this sector look like? We see that it's a sector characterised by young, small startups, enterprises, and businesses. We see that the businesses have 77% of the businesses have less than 20 employees. We see that over 51% of the businesses were founded within the last 5 years. But we also see that these businesses are struggling to make a profit. So 43% of the businesses operated at a loss. And so this might be indicative of the formative stages of these businesses and their early stage revenue profiles. But in spite of these struggles, we also see that 66%, that's 2 in every 3 businesses, are optimistic about their growth trajectories. So we see a young, small businesses in the sector that are struggling to make a profit, but they're still optimistic about the future. So what are some of the struggles that they're facing? We asked the businesses what the challenges are across the sector. So up here on the graph, you can see the challenges down the left-hand side. Each of these bars adds up to 100%. And the distribution shows how people responded to the question how severe each of the challenges is. So on the left-hand side, we see where people have indicated that the issues are not a challenge. And on the right-hand side, we see the distribution of responses where people have indicated that it's a critical challenge. So what this graph is showing is that over half of businesses identify that securing funding and investment is a critical or somewhat of a critical challenge. We see other key challenges around building customer demand and awareness, achieving profitability, and also scaling production. Less of a challenge for these businesses is finding and retaining skilled staff. So about 20% of businesses indicated this is a challenge, and it still is a significant challenge for those 1 in 5 businesses that identified this as problematic. When we start to unpack some of the challenges and issues in the sector, we see that the funding and investment environment is particularly problematic for the sustainable innovation sector. So again, over half of the businesses told us that it's very difficult or somewhat difficult to access funding. For these businesses, they don't want to compromise on their sustainability values and their values around social equity and positive impact when they are trying to source funding. As one business told us, scarcity of funding and other support for positive impact businesses in New Zealand is a challenge. We are disadvantaged versus other countries in terms of both government support, for example grants, and private investment due to tax structures that incentivise investing in property over productive assets. So we asked businesses what kind of funding would be most beneficial. 3 in every 4 businesses identified that grants would be preferable and would help them right now. Other key sources of funding for these businesses include equity and investment, government incentives, venture capital. Less important was corporate partnerships, angel investment, loans, and crowdfunding. And so this perhaps indicates that a blended finance approach is what's needed as a path forward in the sector. So we also wanted to unpack what's going on in the customer space. What is customer demand and customer awareness like? And so this is perhaps a bit of a good news story. So we see across the businesses that 91% of businesses reported a little to significant growth in terms of demand for their products or services. But what these businesses are struggling with is trying to increase awareness about what they have on offer, increase awareness about their innovations, their products and services. So as we heard in our qualitative findings, the biggest barrier to wider customer adoption for our business is consumer awareness and education. And so these qualitative sentiments were echoed in our quantitative data too. So up here in the graph, what you're seeing is customer awareness is very low to modest. So 2 and 3 businesses rated customer awareness of their product, service or innovation as very low to modest. When we look across the qualitative data, businesses told us that it's very difficult operating in an environment where the cost of living is really driving purchase decisions. So as one business put it, short-term affordability is still top of mind for consumers versus longer-term cost savings. And so what we're seeing in this space is we need stronger storytelling, we need strong narratives around sustainability, and we need more to be done in the space of consumer education. But as my colleague and co-author Joya Kemper points out too, is that consumers also want products that are comparable in terms of price and performance. And so there's a lot of work to be done in the storytelling space as well to drive awareness of what these products and services can do. We asked businesses what the policy environment looks like. And this paints a pretty grim picture. So just 1 in 10, that's 10%, 1 in 10 businesses told us that the policy and regulatory environment is supportive or somewhat supportive of their business model. Businesses identified a range of issues in this space. They talked, for example, about policy consistency. And so this is a quote from one of our businesses: "The large swings in political and funding priorities are a constant challenge and an unproductive draw on resources." We asked the businesses through qualitative questions what some of the changes that could be made in the sector were. And they spoke about having more ambitious environmental and sustainability standards. They spoke about a need for better access to government financial support. And they also pointed to the idea of having tax policy reforms so that tax policy incentivises impact investment. So we wanted to hear from businesses what are some of the actions and supports that they need to accelerate their sustainable innovations. And it probably comes as no surprise to you now that 3/4 of businesses said that they need access to funding and investment. They also need support with marketing and customer awareness, and they need support in the government policy and regulatory space. Less support is needed around supply chains and logistics. I think it's also quite interesting to point out that these businesses operating in the sustainable innovation space, while they're in that space, 1/3 of them pointed out that they would like support with ESG and sustainability. So as well as understanding how we can accelerate sustainable innovation, we want to be able to anticipate what some of the future trends are. So we asked businesses where they see trends emerging over the next 5 years. And it's perhaps unsurprising that businesses talked about AI, automation, and access to data. So they really see these trends as helping with streamlining processes and automating business practices. They also saw some of these trends as enabling them to reach a broader, wider, and deeper target audience. The businesses also spoke around a growing sense of momentum in the sustainability space, and that they perceived consumers to be more rapidly getting on board sustainability initiatives. And so for businesses, it was important to be leaders and to be ahead in this space. So businesses indicated in their qualitative responses that being a leader in the sustainability space was not only gives them a competitive advantage, but it also enables them to have positive impact in wider society. So one of the businesses told us that consumers' increasing awareness that our linear extraction-based food system is broken for them, the consumer, and for the planet, was one of the trends that they saw emerging. While another talked about the advantage of being able to produce locally, but that relies on being able to scale operations. So as we see these trends emerge and evolve, the question then becomes, how can we scale innovations? How can we strengthen and grow the sector? And how can we position Aotearoa New Zealand as a leader in the sustainable innovation space? So today we're calling on 6 key urgent actions that we can all collectively contribute to as consumers, as businesses, as sector leaders, and as government decision makers. These 6 urgent actions call for values-aligned investment. We need to leverage procurement processes and policy to back sustainable business and support sustainable innovations and products. We need to use storytelling to build consumer awareness, and we need to invest in the conditions for scale. But this all relies on fostering cross-sector leadership and collaboration. What the next wave has shown us is that we have businesses that are enthusiastic, that are optimistic, and that are determined to succeed. But what they need is the systems, the investments, the policy conditions, and the environments that will support them to grow and scale their innovations so that they can have positive impact for people, place, and planet. We know the innovators are ready, so who will stand with them?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate, for sharing, for doing all that work yourself and Joya, and sharing those key findings. They're pretty clear. I'm not sure how many people thought there were some surprises there, but there's some key insights. Now, a link to that report, the full report, is going to be in your inboxes by the time you get back to the office. Yeah. Okay, so let's hear from some of these innovators. So what we said is that each of these 3 innovators have just initially 5 minutes to just share a bit about their story and their interpretation of their journey and their needs. And then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion. So first up, welcome, Jessie.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Jessie Stanley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a startup clean tech company called Grub. We are looking to take food waste and upcycle this to an alternative protein, and also a biofertiliser. We're harnessing the incredible bioconverting abilities of the amazing black soldier fly. It's an insect that is found in New Zealand and globally. This is its hair in its little grub form. Essentially, the powerhouse of good grub is this amazing insect. It has a voracious appetite. It powers through eating lots of food waste, which is very important for our planet because we produce an abundant supply of food waste. We shockingly waste 40% of all the food that we produce on the planet. And if you couple this together with our growing population, set to hit 10 billion by 2050, you can see that there's many more mouths to feed, as well as a growing issue and mountain of food waste. And as that food waste goes into landfill, it rots and creates emission. So we have an urgent necessity to utilise food waste in a more meaningful way. So the wonderful thing about us is that the protein becomes a really incredible ingredient for circularity and putting back into our food chain. It can feed other animals. So we may not think of insects as food, but it's actually a really important part of our natural food chain. Insects are a deeply important part of the diets of many wild animals, and it helps not only just with protein, but it's many health and wellbeing properties that lay the foundation for growth and immune health in animals. So we create this protein. Essentially, we harvest the insect in its grub form, which is a little bit like this. It becomes a protein powder, and this becomes a viable ingredient for use in pet food and aquafeed. And even their byproducts, their poos, are exciting as well. This becomes an incredible biofertiliser that we can use to put back into our soils and be an alternative for synthetics that we obviously have a big problem with in New Zealand, and help regenerate soil health. So you can see it's a twofold situation where we're making valuable products to help heal our food chain and our soils, as well as reducing emissions from that rotting food waste. So where we are on our journey is that our company, a startup, we're looking to be the first commercial pilot plant scale operation to hit New Zealand, a biorefinery. We like to say we're working with Mother Nature, this incredible insect, but just layering a few things like agri-robotics and high-tech equipment around it. So, and a real partnership there. But obviously with that type of equipment comes a pretty hefty price tag. To get this project off the ground, it's a whopping $7.5 million. So we have, where we are on our journey is that we have got co-funding from the government through the New Zealand Waste Minimisation Fund. Yay! Yay! Not an easy thing to do. $3.5 million we got there. But obviously a chunky $4 million in co-funding is required to get this off the ground. Really proud to say we've got halfway there. We've yay! We've raised $2 million. We've had incredible backing from Motion Capital. Ralph's here today, which is fantastic. Amazingly supportive of us on our journey. And we've also had other investors through private capital as well. However, not to sugarcoat this, that final $2 million is not easy to get, especially in New Zealand. We have really worked hard and pushed and pushed and pushed. So it's funny, we've got great support from the likes of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and my lovely the person helping there was like, you're not alone, Jessie. Many companies like us in this kind of awkward sort of, we are steel and infrastructure and robotics and things. We're not a SaaS company. We're not just an office that you can plug in a computer. This is still high risk. Also insect biorefinery. We're not the first globally to get here. Some may consider us that we're not going to be that unicorn, but I'm damn sure we will be providing incredible, we're New Zealanders and we've got lots of innovation that we want to bring to this emerging, exciting industry, but we're in awkward shape. So for some people, our capital raise is considered too small, for others far too large, and they're obviously, how do you convince venture capital to, come on board with this sort of, slightly different shape of what we're doing. So if anybody's got any bajillionaires out there, please give him my number. I'd love to chat, but I'm really grateful to be here today, hoping to provide a bit of a coalface insight of what it's really like out there as an emerging clean tech company on the capital raise. I had a funny comment from my NZTE lady as well. She said, you know, Jessie, capital raising is a little bit like chewing glass. And I was like, yep. But I will chew the glass if I have to get there. I'm very passionate about trying to make change, and I'm proud to be trying to do something different and being part of the journey. We need thousands of people to be brave and try and do things differently.
Thank you so much, Jessie. We'll be hearing a bit more. I think we would delve into a bit more of those that issue around capital. But yeah, direct from the coalface or grub face. Thank you so much. Next up, Andrew Minturn from CLEVACO. Over to you.
Thank you, James. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate all the comments we've had so far. An amazing opportunity. Thank you, James and Rachel, for your team for putting this on. For us as entrepreneurs, it is a challenge, and I echo every sentiment that has just been said. For us, this is a 10-year journey. This is not something that's 5 minutes. We're one of the older groups as opposed to the young ones that are doing it, and no disrespect to the research. My business partner and I came up with this crazy idea 10 years ago. It is effectively an upside-down paddling pool, of which there is a selection up there, slightly more sophisticated than I might add, but what it does is replaces that horrible product called polystyrene in construction. In construction, they use a product in waffle floors, and all it is a concrete saver. That's all it does. It's just a void. Unfortunately, when you're using a very cheap product and you then innovate with something that is, in our case, 100% recyclable, the cost does increase. My business partner and I have invested $5 million of our own money into this, and we're sadly seeking extra money. The construction industry, unfortunately, doesn't have a lot of focus in terms of funding. And I've applied 3 times to waste minimisation. Each time I've been declined purely in the place that there is nothing specific for the construction industry. I've had the same argument with the Callahan Institute when it was around about the same thing. And so in an industry, it tends to forget 15% of GDP, which is what our industry comes from. So it's incredibly challenging for me and many other entrepreneurs in the construction industry because there is nothing targeted for us. And again, there are targeted funds for other industries, but it keeps forgetting the construction industry. How can we innovate? How can we improve? How can we create a sustainable future if there is nothing there to support it? So for us, we've funded this ourselves. We are looking for another $5 million. Each one of our machines, unfortunately, the machine to produce this is $5.5 million. The robot that takes the pod off the machine is another $1.5 million. And our mould that goes into that is $1 million US. So it's a lot of money and very large infrastructure. So we're producing these things, we're making these things, but it is a struggle. For us, at the end of the day, it is about continuing this journey. And as an entrepreneur, you find, and we could write the same book as you've read, every entrepreneur, get down, get up, get down, get up. You look at all those struggles. Finance is one of those struggling things that you always come up against. And as I said, we've been very fortunate that we've been able to fund this ourselves, but I tell you right now, the tank is empty. There is nothing left from us. We cannot afford to put any more money into this, and so we're actively seeking investment. The banks don't know us because we don't have anything in terms of we've got $3 or $4 million worth of assets. I don't give a stuff about that. They want to put my house onto the market. My wife doesn't feel comfortable about that. All right. And then when you've got the government, don't know anything because they don't have any investment packages suitable for the construction industry. So we're looking for other alternatives. And when James mentioned this type of opportunity, we said, we're in. We want to be there. We want to, because it's not just us. We're just one particular business that's dealing with something. But for us, if I could put this into perspective, and I've said this to the meeting a number of times, we can't fix what's already happened. So in New Zealand, if you look at the amount of concrete which is contaminated with polystyrene at the moment, if you visualize a Giza pyramid, those of you who know anything about history, the Giza pyramid, there are 9 of those currently sitting in New Zealand full of contaminated concrete which is going to end up in landfill. And we're as a dirty industry, we produce 50% of all the landfill at the moment. So we can't fix that. I can't fix that problem. In Australia, because we deal in Australia as well, that's 90 Giza pyramids. It basically fills 3/4 of Sydney Harbour with that contaminated concrete. So it is a blight that we're going to have to deal with. Our children and our grandchildren have to deal with this process. But we've produced the first ever, world's first, fully recyclable concrete floor. And we've proven that. So we put a floor down, and then 4 months later we completely and utterly demolished that floor and recycled 100% of it. First time ever in the world that that's ever taken place. So we can do it. So we can save any future problems, but we need the industry to support it. And our industry, God bless the industry, it's all about the money. And you go to them with a new product that costs more, because it costs more for the product, the manufacturing process and things like that. They all go, love what you're doing, think it's absolutely fantastic, but it's all about the money. So convincing our customers, our stakeholders, is a really difficult thing. And we really, really applaud where SBN sit on that scale with us. We actively participate in the area, but we need more support. We need people to help us, and we thank the Auckland Council. The Auckland Council are a huge, big support of what we're trying to do, but it is a major, major problem for us. If you think about what's happening in our landfills from the polystyrene, and how much that actually is, it's massive. So that's a little bit of a regret about where we are and where we'd like to be, and I'm standing right in the same line as her in terms of the money. Anybody want my business card, come and see me. I think that's at least, that's about $10 million, I think, that we've talked about right now. So we'll split that 50-50, come and see me, see you later. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Andrew. And hey, is there a common theme coming through? I'm not so sure. Okay, on to our next speaker, who might talk more about this common theme. Rohan.
He's the guy with the name. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, ko MacMahon toku whānau, ko Rohan toku ingoa. Thank you very much to Rachel and everybody at SBN for the opportunity to talk with you today. Thank you very much to Kate and the University for the research that you've been doing. It is really fascinating and important. I'm a partner at the Climate Venture Capital Fund. We are both part of the problem and part of the solution to what you've been hearing about.
I'll see you later.
I'll give you my business card. We started about 5 years ago. There was a month called March 2020. You might remember it. It was a reasonably eventful month. That was the month when a bunch of investors that I'm part of were intent on getting our fund on the road. The on the road part turned out to be virtually on the road. But what we tried to do and have since executed on is delivering New Zealand's first climate-specific investment fund. And we did that because we asked ourselves the question, what is it that we most need to respond to climate change? It's a massive topic. It requires the transformation of our entire economy, the reform of our society, and some pretty material changes to a lot of different things. But the most important thing we need is to reduce emissions. Yet what we saw was that not a lot of money was going into reducing emissions. Venture capital, which is the kind of funding category that I guess we're part of, is about taking equity in early stage companies that have transformative potential to deliver on their various aspirations, to realise their potential. But in New Zealand, venture capital is not a well-developed area. And most of the venture capital firms or VC firms or funds are generalists, and they invest in healthcare or fintech or software, IT. I'm part of an investment group that's been doing that for years. But what we didn't have in this part of the world is something that you see elsewhere all around the place, which is climate-specific funding streams. Sometimes government agencies are at the table, sometimes they're not. Sometimes banks are at the table, sometimes they're not. But the venture funds, around the world, there's two kinds really. There's generalists and there's specific thematic funds. We decided to form the Climate Venture Capital Fund back in 2020 to be that thematic fund that was going to partner with firms like you've been hearing from today to take them on the journey to invest in them and hopefully to share in the success, and then to share that with our limited partners to help them realise those profits and hopefully recycle that into more and more investment and more success. 5 years later, we've seen that delivered to an extent. We've got a clutch of portfolio companies, folk like yourselves, who are working really, really hard out there to deliver on their aspirations and are delivering measurable reductions in greenhouse gas emissions every day. Every unit of revenue that they bring in the door produces a measurable outcome in terms of reduction in nitrous oxide or methane or carbon dioxide. That's the good news. The bad news is it's not happening fast enough. It's not happening at enough scale. So when I saw that I'm at the top of that chart of the issues that we're grappling with, I see the work that we do and others in the room are doing is definitely part of the solution, but also as part of the problem because we need to go faster. So we are knocking on a lot of doors ourselves, trying to make this ecosystem go faster. There is progress there because the things are moving a little forward in a way that probably wasn't happening last year. We're part of the same economic cycle as everyone else, so when it's a recession, people struggle to find their wallets. If they can find their wallets, there's not a lot in there. In a high inflationary environment after COVID, it's difficult for people to find the capital to invest. But we are part of a vibrant tech ecosystem. SBN and the next wave is only one part of a very vibrant tech system in tech sector in Aotearoa New Zealand, which is doing hard work, is delivering for our economy, is delivering for our society, and is slowly taking us away from that dependence on commodity products, on extraction, and is taking us towards a more resilient, more circular, more regenerative future. I hope to continue to be part of that. We are open for investment as well, and so I'd love to talk with any of you there who are also bajillionaires. And then maybe we can help more of the Jesses and Andrews of the world. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing those insights, Rohan. And yeah, part of the solution and part of the problem. You know, it's an interesting position to be in. Okay, so let's delve into some of those themes. So Vincent, you're going to be the man asking some tough questions. Is that right? Sure, yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you. Kia ora everybody, I'm Vincent Heringer. I'm part of the SBN and part of the next program. So it's my pleasure to ask some questions of our panellists, but also invite questions from you. So are you comfortable sitting? Would you like to stand? Are you happy to sit? And can everybody see? Okay, fantastic. All right. Let's start with the opportunity because you're not here just to make life difficult for yourselves, I assume. So there's got to be upside. There's got to be upside both in an impact way but also in a financial way. So I'm curious, and maybe we'll start with you, Rohan, just around what is the scale of the opportunity that would justify people, liberating their wallets for you?
The scale of the opportunity is literally the reinvention of the economy in the next 20 years or so. If we're to get to a net zero position by 2050, which is too late, we have 25 years. Realistically, we should be trying to do it much faster than that. Now, if you look at previous technology revolutions that we've seen, the Industrial Revolution, steam and coal, the internet economy, software as a service and social media, electrification, each of these waves has transformed part of the economy. We're talking about transforming the whole of the economy. So every product and every service that has a high emissions footprint needs to become something that's got a low emissions footprint. And a lot of the things that we hear talked about are things that are a good start, but only actually in certain specific areas. So if you're into transport, people will talk about EVs. If you're into energy, people will talk about electrification and renewables. If you're into agriculture, people will talk about the issue of methane for ruminant animals. Those are all important things. But what about process heat for manufacturing, for our consumer products? What about all of the products that are not regenerative, that are throwing a lot of waste and a lot of emissions out the back end of their process with not a lot of thought going into it? We see the ambit as being incredibly wide, and our sort of only investment precondition is that we have to be able to see how that work turns into emissions reduction.
Mm. So you're sort of saying every object that we see in this room has to have some sort of transformation in the manufacturing and the disposal and the use and so on. So it's kind of like everything.
I see it as being potentially everything. We pick the things that are commercially attractive and that have emissions impact. We have invested in consumer products. For example, there's a company called Cleanery, which is in the Next 95, which is a member of SBN and is represented on the board back there. Fantastic company that is literally decarbonising the cleaning aisle of your supermarket. It's a really awesome product, and what it does is reduce the need for plastic bottles that are filled with water. So I mean, that's just one specific example, but it is quite a wide-ranging aspiration, I guess.
Yeah. How about you, Jessie? Because you described the food waste problem, but what is the tell us about the business opportunity in Good Grub?
Yeah, so we have customers that want our protein. We have a financial model that shows that we're profitable. And we have innovation, our own IP that we want to bring to this global conversation of insect biorefinery.
So there could be like
Absolutely.
royalties or commercialising your knowledge?
Absolutely, yes. We bring IP to help support our venture capital investment, and that's why we've managed to secure a cornerstone investor through Motion Capital. But I think it's just... I think, like when you're talking about venture, people are still really, there's that challenge between sort of, I think there is the hunt for that very much, like you have to prove that you are going to be providing scalable global impact. And I think venture capital people have money on their mind as well as also the environmental impact. But there is there's tension between kind of, there are lots of companies out there that are still going to be making impact, and like ours, still making meaningful change and reducing emissions. However, maybe because it's not seen as 100 times your investment return, that's where it's awkward. So there's lots of people missing out because they're not going to be potentially taking this and making it global. And that's the challenge that I have for the venture capital world. That
sounds like you've moved from a business proposition to an impact proposition.
Well, it's about sort of, I think, like that cutting edge of, they're looking for the unicorns, right? But there's many viable companies there that will be making emissions, and we need thousands of people to join this party, not just for venture capital to be able to return money in multiples of, in massive amounts.
Yes.
So that is my challenge to the venture world in terms of that.
Yeah.
There are still lots of viable companies around that can be, and they're missing out.
Yeah. Andrew, in your case, the business opportunity would come about if waste was properly priced, right? At the moment, all of that contaminated concrete carries no cost, so the true cost is not captured, and therefore the true value is not captured for you. Have you tried to make that argument?
Yes. So, full disclosure, my background is I used to be chief advisor for the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, so I've come from the dark side, if you like. And I've also spent 15 years sort of teaching this sort of stuff to the United Nations, so I've had quite a bit of background in terms of the regulatory environments. It's fair to say that Australia is way ahead of us in terms of the way that they think, the way they operate, the way that they pursue all things environmental, sustainable, circular economy, the whole lot.
It's annoying, isn't it?
Yeah. So, we have businesses on both sides of the Tasman, and fair to say we're supported way more than we are in Australia than we are in our home turf, which is a very sad indictment on the situation, but that's the way that they think and operate. For us, in terms of where do we think things going, I look to Australia to a large extent. They have a higher degree of regulatory environment that supports waste minimisations. And they also agree, coming from a construction background, we also understand that you can't ban products unless there is enough of an alternative supply. Otherwise, you effectively kill the industry that you're actually trying to support. So neither regulator in New Zealand or Australia is likely to ban, in our case, polystyrene immediately because there is a huge use of it. In New Zealand, at the peak, before we went in a bit of a doldrums, we were making, not us personally, but our competitors making 10,000 polystyrene pods a day. In Australia, it's 100,000 pods a day, because it's about 10 times the size of the market. You extrapolate that out and you start getting very blurry eyes very quickly about the cost and the waste associated with that. So for us, our product can be recycled. Now, I'm not saying that we take a pod out once you dismantle that floor and you use it again. It just reverts back to its raw material bead again, and you can use it again and again and again. So in New Zealand and Australia, the same basic law applies, that it has to meet a 50-year minimum use, anything in the building construction industry. But most buildings, and I was at a symposium yesterday talking about the life of buildings. Good buildings should last 100 to 150 years. So you extrapolate that out. Theoretically, homes can last anything from 50 years to 150 years to 300 years, depending on how well it's built. So our product, in theory, has a 300-year life at the end of it. And at that particular point, all you need to do is you then tweak the chemical composition ever so fractionally by putting a little bit more virgin plastic into it, and you're back to start again with another 300 years. Now, I'm no scientist in that sense, but I expect by that stage somebody's come up with a completely different way of putting foundations down, and we won't be worrying too much about that particular point. But between now and then, that's an awful lot of waste.
Yeah. So these transition points that all of you are pointing towards, you can see the benefit in the long term. You have short-term challenges. So that kind of the chasm, the valley of death, has to be overcome somehow, Rohan. And what does that take? Kind of idiotic blind faith that's not going to wash with your investors. What are the arguments to make around crossing that chasm?
Well, we're looking for transformative technologies that are compelling in terms of their economics as well as their environmental impact. In the IT world, if you like, which is part of my background, people will often talk about better, faster, cheaper. So, if a product is going to be compelling, it needs to be better, faster and cheaper. And these days, that generally means better environmentally and with lower emissions as part of that. If the product is going to be meaningfully more expensive, that really does make it difficult. A couple of, to illustrate that just a little bit, if you think of Cleanery, the company I mentioned before, because it doesn't have the plastic bottle, there's no cost of a plastic bottle. Because it doesn't have water in it, you're not paying for the transport of all that water. Because of both those things, you don't have to pay for the storage of the plastic bottle and the water. So it's just a lot cheaper. I think in Andrew's case, that's not available to you. Polystyrene is incredibly cheap. I think a regulatory signal would be so helpful there that would actually say, this is a difficult product to get rid of, but we would like to get rid of it. I can't see how you can get around the need for sympathetic government policy in some areas. In others, such as Cleanery, the economics are actually pretty clear. And so when we sell that product through supermarkets and through to consumers, we don't have to sell it at a premium price because we actually don't need to make good margins. That's not available in every category.
Yeah. What would help you in a government, in a kind of policy sort of way? I mean, there's probably funding and grants, but we sort of touched on that. But what would improve kind of the market conditions, if you like, that government could actually influence?
I suppose we've been quite supportive because obviously we've got a waste minimisation fund.
Yes.
I suppose it goes into the actual deep regulations around the insect world and so forth. But that's, we are kind of in an okay place, I suppose, because we've had that early days. But unsure how they, they've come to the party with co-funding. We're looking for money through private, more grants. I suppose, I don't know if we can double dip from that.
in waste regulation, for instance, it's the same way where we can throw things in the ground without any consequence, right?
Yeah, I think there is an opportunity, like you say, if we could, if there was more sort of like ability to. It's really difficult to get these grants. We were lucky that we were able to hit the sweet spot for what the requirements were. However, I definitely see that it's very restrictive on others, and this is a perfect, Andrew's pointed out as well, this is a clear need, yet just because it's a very small area that you can get a grant, it excludes a lot of people.
Yes.
So yeah, expansion and realistic, that would help.
Any questions from the floor? Yes, Matt.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Saskia. You just said if it's meaningful but more expensive, it's going to be a problem. But the problem is not necessarily that it's more expensive, but because the other products are costed more, right? So how do we make that difference to actually level up what we're actually comparing against each other? Because otherwise, that's just a flawed system to start with.
I completely agree.
I might just repeat the question for the sake of the people online. So the question was if there was a true cost accounting system that accounted for, I'm assuming, the pollution and spoiling the commons, then the economics would stack up. Good summary? Whew, I'll keep my job. Rohan.
I think you've really nailed it. That is actually the problem of climate change and indeed of other forms of pollution and waste. If you start studying commerce or economics, they will tell you that externalities don't have a cost. But that's simply not true. We can all see the cost. We're paying the cost of climate not being, of our atmosphere not being priced, if you must price it, in terms of our insurance, the burden of taxpayer support for adaptation funding, for flood relief, for any number of forms of costs that are out there. And no one gets out of it without paying for that. It's just that it's not evident in the price that you're paying for a particular product. And that's changing a little bit. We have the emissions trading scheme. More carbon is being priced around the world every day. The price signal is too weak, and it's not universal across the board, but it is getting there. So once again, I would say, steps in the right direction, but not enough. If we could price externalities, including waste, correctly, a lot of things would change really quickly. In the carbon world, we've sort of taken some baby steps in the right direction.
I agree 100%. At the end of the day, but our particular industry, you are absolutely right, Vincent, that there is no downside to dumping waste. And I'm talking huge amounts of waste, millions of tons of waste that gets away with it. So what would help us, and probably other companies similar, would be an expansion of the waste levy in some way. And what I'm saying there is, in Australia, this regulatory environment, it penalises waste in the sense that if you leave, in our case, polystyrene on the site for more than 24 hours, it's like a $1,500 fine. If you don't put a fence right around the whole site with your matting around it to prevent the polystyrene blowing off, it's another $3,500 fine. What you could do is you could use or manipulate, I guess, the waste levy to incentivise people not to use an environmental contaminant. So if you do use an environmental contaminant, you're not banning it, but you're saying if you use it, there is a cost. The cost is long term at the end of the day. You're absolutely right in the sense that at some point our children and grandchildren are going to have to deal with, in our case, millions of tonnes of this waste which is going into landfill. And because we don't have any scientific material at the moment to extract those, it all goes, and I mean the whole lot goes into landfill, which is huge amounts. So if you said to a builder, and this is the point of change in terms of getting them to incentivise moving from one product to another, you can use that product, but there is a waste incentive charge against that, which immediately probably brings the price down to almost in line with a product like ourselves. So our product, it has a lot of advantages, and I was talking one of the other, Andrew, somewhere around here but earlier, it's the global amount. It's not just the price of the product, whereas in our industry you look at a price of a product versus a price of a product. It is the full length, it's the cost of transportation. We are 8 to 1 in terms of we produce, so it's 8 times less the amount of transport, 8 times less the amount of carbon just to transport our product. At the end of it, we can recycle 100% of it. We're using 100% recycled product to start with, and at the end of its life, we can recycle it again. None of that goes into the head of an individual who's trying to buy a house, in this case with a slab in it. They don't look at the full picture. So we really support the endeavours of the SBN in the sense of trying to get that message out, that it isn't just about a price product per price product. And you're absolutely right, we can't make our product the same price as the cheap polystyrene. It's just physically impossible. But we do everything else we can in terms of the full ecosystem around that to suggest and supply why it is as cheap as the alternative. But its long-term benefits and a cost benefit is enormous, absolutely enormous.
Thanks, Andrew. So I think what we've heard today is it's exciting, it's difficult, and it's systemic, right? So, one of the motivations for creating the next wave was to generate a level of support, encouragement, dialogue across industry, across government, helping entrepreneurs to at least, at the very least, get a hug. If you could part with some cash along the way, I'm sure they'd be happy about that too. But this is a systemic problem that we're addressing in storytelling. Hearing the stories, hearing the struggle, and encouraging each other is a big part of this kaupapa. So we really appreciate you as entrepreneurs and also as panellists today. Please, a warm round of applause.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks, Vincent, for facilitating that. So it's now over to me to tell you what's next. So in September, we will be announcing the next cohort of award finalists, and interesting, some of the people who have put the hat in the ring are in the room today, so fingers crossed for you. And SBN aren't the judges, though, so there's no point bribing us. But then we are very excited to talk about what's happening on the 19th and 20th of November. It's the Next Fest. Now, this is a festival of sustainable innovation, and I can confidently say it's the largest festival of sustainable innovation ever in Aotearoa, because it's the first one. So we have got, it's the awards ceremony. It's an expo of sustainable innovators, and it's a conference. Now, we are announcing today, tremendously excited to announce some of our first keynotes, and we're going to kick off the morning, and he's going to kick some ass as well, with George Monbiot, very esteemed activist and author and journalist for The Guardian. The intellectual heavyweight of Ken Webster is going to talk about innovation on a sort of a macro global scale and what's happening there. And then we've got more to be announced, but local innovators, Irina Miller from Daisy Lab and Sarah Mahadi from Lodestone Energy, talking about what it's like to innovate and scale in the current political and economic environment of uncertainty. This is not to be missed. Now, as a special reward for you here and online for getting up early and coming and joining us, we have got we're doing something crazy. We are offering for 24 hours, 24 tickets for this whole Next Fest at $200. Now, that is, I tell you, that's not even going to cover the catering. So, if you just look at, you can use the QR code, and it's literally up there for just 24 hours, one ticket per person, please. So, the other thing I need to mention on the, we're talking about events not to be missed, coming up very shortly. On the 6th of August, we have our Nature and Business Symposium happening up the road. That is going to be fantastic. Now, I just want to sort of finish on a reflection. I just want to loop back to that optimism that was uncovered in the report and Kate talked about, and we've been hearing as well about through our speakers. So, I mean, often optimism can be thought as wishful thinking. But what we're seeing here, and with the Next 95, that's not the case at all. It's optimism based in reality. It's optimism being responsible. It's acknowledging the scale of the environmental crises that we face. And it's taking it a step further than that. It's putting that awareness into action. And that action is deeply responsible, and it's deeply hopeful. And so hopefully we're all feeling a bit optimistic. And so I'd really like to sort of ask for two things from you here today. The first is to keep that optimism going and do one thing to support these innovators, these Next 95. It could be to tell their story. It could be to buy their product. Why not? Or invest in their companies to help them scale, or even open the door for them that they can walk through. You know, we can collectively make a difference. And the second thing is to get involved in our collective work to help scale these innovators. And it could be to buy one of those ridiculously priced tickets, and you'd be crazy not to. It may be to tell your friends to buy a full price ticket. It may be to join us and be a sponsor of the Next Fest, or it may be even to, if you want to sponsor the next iteration of the next wave in 2026, we'd love you to do that as well. So those are some things that we'd love you to do. Now, thank you again for turning up so early. Thank you to Kate and Joya at the University of Canterbury and her colleagues for doing the research and putting that together. Thank you to Jessie, Andrew and Rohan. Thank you, Vincent, and thank you for the team at SBN, particularly Malika for putting Nave for putting this all together and getting up nice and early, and also to JX Live for enabling us to beam this to the world. So, and literally, we have registrations. People are watching this in France, Nepal, all over the place. So. That's great. Okay, let's finish off with a closing karakia. Unahia, 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 ki te urutapa nui, kia wātia, kia mama, tenaka, te tinana, te warua, ki te aratangata, koira, leono, pakahia, aki ki runga, kia tina, huie, tā kia. Okay, thank you all, and there's some food and coffee still there.